So let's look at continuing with the subjects about Truma, not by yevamos too much. There is going to be some mention about Yibam over here, and the question is how it falls in, because subject is not talking about yevamos. So we talked about Truma. So just to zoom out, that a Kohen is Truma, Israel not. How about marriage? How does marriage affect that? So Abbas Kohen, that she's allowed to eat Truma. When she marries Yisrael, she's not allowed to. And if the marriage is over with death or with divorce, so then she could go back to her father's house to eat Truma unless she has children. That's what the pasuk says. The opposite, if there's a Abbas Yisrael, she cannot eat Truma, but if she marries a Kohen, she may eat Truma. And that's because of Miknas Kaspa. That's not because of the marriage, it's because of the acquisition of marriage, not because of the relationship of the marriage. The same way that the Kohen's slaves could eat also Kohen's wife. And if she has children, there's also a lot that yesterday I didn't understand where it came from. Today Rashi brings it down. It's supposed to be a drash, and the Gemara says in Nida, V'yilid beisohem yachlu b'lachamo, and we dash V'yilid beisohem yachilu b'lachamo, that those that are born to a Kohen, they not only could eat, they also could give to eat. So that's the din that a woman who has children from her husband who's a Kohen, so the child is a Kohen or a Kohenes, so she's allowed to eat Truma also. Now the Mishnah says there are some people, Poslan v'lo ma'achila, means we would say that anything which would allow one to eat Truma, these two cases go together. You have a Bas Yisrael to a Kohen, a Bas Kohen to Yisrael. The Bas Yisrael, she needs somebody to give her to eat Truma. That's Machila. And then you have a Bas Kohen that she was allowed to eat Truma because of her own lineage, and then somebody parcels her, like a husband could parcel her from eating Truma. So that's going to be an issue is about Postan and Lo Machila. Some people, they were Kohenes, and she'd be allowed to eat Truma, but somebody's going to parcel them. And some people that cannot eat Truma, and there's a ma'achil, someone could give them to eat Truma. And there's going to be some kind of people that they have all the chumras. On one hand, Postlin, if the person was allowed to eat Truma, they're going to stop them from eating Truma. And if it was a person who was not allowed to eat Truma, they're not going to be able to give them Truma. Everything goes wrong. The first one is Ober. Ober means that a woman is pregnant. So if a woman is pregnant, my Chavusa suggested we learn through all 5 things on Postlin, and then we'll learn through all 5 things on Lo Machila. Makes it simpler to go through. The Gemara is going to go one by one, but just to get the introduction to the Mishnah. We'll talk about Postlin. Postlin means that it's a woman who's a Kohen, Bas Kohen, and now there's going to be somebody who's going to stop her from eating Truma. So how does it go? Uber, that Bas Kohen, that is now is pregnant. She was married to Yisrael, but now he died. And she would like to eat Truma because she's a Bas Kohen, but the fact that she's pregnant stops her from eating Truma. Yavam would be the Bas Kohen who was married to a Kohen, about to a Yisrael, but he died. And now she wants to go back and eat Truma from her father's house. No, the fact that she's Kufal Yavam, that there's a brother-in-law waiting for her, that she doesn't get Chalitza from, so then she cannot go back to eat Truma. The Yavam stops her from eating Truma. Erusin, this is talking about the original marriage of Bas Kohen, who gets Erusin to a Yisrael. The Erusin itself terminates the Truma. She can't eat Truma because she's Arusa, even though that marriage was not culminated yet. Still, she cannot, not culminated, whatever, they didn't consummate it, that it wasn't finished. They didn't have Nisuin, but still, the Erusin of the Yisrael already stops her from eating Truma. Cheresh would mean that she, as a Bas Kohen, she was eating Truma, but now she's married to a Cheresh. Cheresh is somebody that does not have Das, and the marriage is only marriage Drabbana. So the marriage Drabbana to a Yisrael also stops her from eating Truma. And Ben Teisha Shan B'Yom is a 9-year-old boy. That usually we know that the 9-year-old is the cutoff point when his bia is a bia. That less than that, if he cohabits with a woman, it's not considered anything. But once he's 9-year-old, it's mature enough, physical maturity as considered a bia. So we have to figure out how that fits into over here, postly. Just to say what the Gemara is going to say at the end, the Maskanas the Gemara is going to be that Ben Teisha Shan B'Yom means if it was a usher relationship, there was something wrong with this relationship. They were not allowed to have a union. If it was Chai B'Aseh, Chai B'Lavin, Chai B'Kris, whatever it might be. So the woman becomes now a puzzle to eat Truma, even though she was a Bas Kohen, not to eat Truma. But if she was Nival Pasala, if she had relations with a man who she's not allowed to, so once he's 9 years old, it's considered a bia. If it was less than 9 years old, it's not considered a bia at all. She still be kosher to eat Truma. She's a Bas Kohen. But if the puzzle person she had a relationship with, so that's going to puzzle her. The Gemara takes time to figure that out. That's how the Gemara is going to come out. Now let's do the whole list again. We had 5 things: Ober, Yavam, Erusin, Cheresh, Ben Teisha Shan B'Yom. 5 issues we just went through the Mishnah of a Bas Kohen who got messed up because of these 5 people.
So, but the Cheresh really could be replaced with just a regular Yisrael.
What do you mean?
Just a regular,
No, Yisrael is Pasha that posting. But
Right.
the Chiddush is even a Cheresh, that is not really a marriage. Really, there's no marriage. So you might think that she's a Bas Kohen, she's not really married. But there are one in marriage makes, but one she's married. Yeah, you're right. And now we're going to talk about the whole list of 5 things in the Lo Machilin that he's talking about Abbas Yisrael. Abbas Yisrael is not allowed to eat Truma, but now maybe something's giving her Truma. And the Chiddush is going to be that these people are not strong enough to be able to give her Truma. What's the case of Uber? Uber would be that she's now Muberes from a Kohen. She married a Kohen, and she was allowed to eat Truma because of the husband. Husband died, but now she's pregnant. And we said that if she has a child, she would be able to eat Truma because of the child. But Uber means that if she only has a pregnancy, she has a fetus who's going to be a Kohen, that's not enough to be able to give her to eat Truma. We said yesterday 2 possibilities. One is going to be because he's not a Kohen, but we say he's not a Kohen till he's born, or he is a Kohen, but he doesn't have the ability to give over the Truma, to feed Truma. So that would be the case of Uber. Abbas Yisrael, who's married to a Kohen, who was married to a Kohen, and now she's pregnant with a Kohen, that Uber is not enough to be able to give her Truma. Yavam would mean that she's a Abbas Yisrael, who had a husband who's a Kohen, she wasn't allowed to eat Truma, but now her husband died. And there's a Yavam who's a Kohen. Obviously, the husband's brother is also a Kohen. So she might think that she's allowed to eat Truma because she has a Yavam on deck to marry. And maybe that's enough to give her Truma. No, the Yavam does not give her Truma, only after they marry. Erison means that Abbas Yisrael is getting married to a Kohen. So you might think that the Erison is enough to give her Truma. And the truth is that the Rai said it is enough because the reason why she eats Truma is because Miknas Kaspel. And it is Miknas Kaspel, so that Kedushin. But still, she cannot eat Truma. The Erison to the Kohen does not make enough that she should be able to eat Truma. Cherish means that she's married to a Cherish, Kohen. She's Bas Yisrael. She wasn't allowed to eat Truma. Now she's getting married to a Cherish. You might think that the marriage to the Kohen would allow her to eat Truma. No, since it's only a Cherish, it's Kedushin Rabbanan, so they're not really married. So that marriage is not enough to let her to eat Truma. And Ben Teshuv Son of Yom Echad, that has to be explained. That the Gemara is going to try to figure out what does it mean that a 9-year-old Bia is not Machil. The difficulty with a Ben Teshuv is that we only know one thing about a Ben Teshuv, a 9-year-old, that's the cutoff point. When is Bia is considered a Bia? He's born when he's 1 day old, and he cannot get married until he's 13. A boy cannot get married until he's 13 years old. He's a gadol. He has his own maturity. A girl, we saw that the father has the right to marry her off from a 3-year-old already. But a boy is on his own. The boy marries on his own. And he has to be a bardas in order to marry. So that's going to be difficult. What does the Mishnah want with the Ben Teshuv Shana B'Yamechad? That the Gemara is going to try to figure out. So that's the Mishnah, that there are 5 people that they are, if they're Yisraelim, so to speak, most of them Israel, in one case of apostle. So then they apostle a woman who was allowed to eat Truma because she was a Bas Kohen. And the opposite, there are these people that if she would be a Bas Yisrael and they would be the Kohen, they wouldn't be strong enough to be able to give her to eat Truma. The Mishnah continues, Safik Shu Ben Teshanim v'Yom Echad Safik She'eno, that's what the comma is, or Safik Hevi Beisavos for Safik Shelo Hevi. The Mishnah doesn't end off what's the halacha, but it means to say that we're always machmir. If you're not sure if he's a bentes, you're not sure if he's 9-year-old. You're not sure if he's a 9-year-old. So we have to be machmir as if he would be. And what we said before, that apostles, be a psula, a bia of a person who's apostle, if he's 9-year-old, it's considered a bia, it's considered cohabitation. That would be even if it's a suffix, even if it's a doubt if he's 9-year-old also. Also, there's a case about somebody being a gadol, suffix heavy beisaris, that physical maturity, physical adulthood, puberty is when he has 2 saras, when he has two hairs. So that is a gadol, less than that is not. And that will be negated to the din of erison. Erison means when there's a marriage. We're going to see later on that a marriage does affect something. We said that marriage affects, let's say, Abbas Kohen's marrying a Yisrael, and it stops her from eating Truma. That's only if he's 13 years old. What if he's not 13 years old? Then it's not a marriage. So she's not married to the Kohen, and she's not married to the Yisrael. He doesn't stop her from eating Truma. If it's a suffix, also it's going to have the chumrah that maybe he is an adult. We're not sure if he had 13 years old is not enough to be an adult. It has to be 13 years old plus his physical maturity. So if we're not sure, we have to be machmir that it was, and therefore, if Abbas Kohen had an erison from a Yisrael who's a suffix, if he's 13 years old or not, you have to be machmir that it is considered 13 years old, and she'd be puzzled to eat Truma. The next halacha comes in. We don't know where it came in from, and it has to do with yevamos. And we're out of yevamos now. How does it come in the middle of no place? So we're not sure. But it's a nice, enjoyable case. Then we first talk about sfeikis, and it's also a suffix, but it's a pretty loose connection. But just to enjoy the case for herself, there's not going to be any gemara on it. And here's the case. Nafal abayis alav al bas achiv ben yadua eze meis rishon. So we had this once upon a time. It says we had it on the Flamanala before. So here's the case. that we know from the first Mishnah, in the beginning of the Masechta, 2 months ago already, that we had that the yavam, the dead man's brother, who is related to the widow, she's not allowed to marry her. Let's say somebody married. If somebody married his niece, and then he dies without children, so the brother cannot do yibum because it's his daughter. Somebody married his brother's daughter, and then he died. So the brother cannot marry his daughter for yibum. That's called erva. What if the one who died had 2 wives? He had his niece, and he also had another wife. That's a tzara. That's the first mission in the Masechta. That the tzara is also wasn't. Since one wife is an erva to the yavam, so the other wife, the co-wife, also cannot do yibum. Here's a case where we don't know if it's a tzaras erva or not. What's the case? A man was in a house with his wife, who also happens to be his niece. He married his niece, and the case might have also been in a car accident. Here, the house collapsed, and both of them died. He and his wife, both of them died. And there's another co-wife that's now in the house, and she doesn't know she's supposed to do yibum. The husband died without children, and she doesn't know she's supposed to do yibum. What's the question? Who died first? If the husband died first, at that time, she's supposed to yibum. But the problem is, at that time, there's no yibum because she's a tzaras erva. That at that time when he died, that second that he died, the niece, who's also his wife, had not yet died. So at that time that the husband died, he has 2 wives. One of them is his niece, one of them is a co-wife, and none of them fall to yibum because since the niece cannot, the brother cannot marry his daughter, so there's no yibum over there. There's no yibum to the co-wife either. But if even though the co-wife, that the erva died afterwards, a minute later, it doesn't make a difference. At the time of yibum, there was no yibum, and therefore the co-wife doesn't do yibum. She can marry, she cannot yibum. On the other hand, if the wife died first, in that collision, that there was the husband and his niece, his wife who's a niece, the wife would have died first. So then at the time that the husband died, a couple of minutes later, so then there was no erva. She wasn't a tzara. The erva died already. So this co-wife doesn't know if she's supposed to have yibum or not. Who died first? Nobody knows. There's no way to verify it. So we go lechumra, and what do you do? So that's going to be the case of chalitza no yibum, that she can't go free. She can't marry her because maybe she's a yavam. She can't do yibum. Maybe she's a brother. Maybe it's a eshesach shalom no mitzvah. So chalitza without yibum. So that's the mission. This last halacha comes in, and we don't know how it came in over here. We're not talking about these subjects at all. But that's halacha, and it makes sense. We understand it from before. And now we go back to the beginning of the Mishnah. The Gemara is going to discuss these 5 things. So when we explained the Mishnah, we did it easy. And we explained all 5 things, first about postlin, then all 5 things about lama chilin. But the Gemara is going to take one at a time and discuss both cases. One is going to be, each time we're going to discuss, let's see if I can get rid of this over here. Okay, I'm not sure what that is.
I think it happened when it was something that had happened from Chaim David's phone. I tried to ask him, I'm not sure if he's noticed.
Okay.
So David came on and then the arrow showed up.
Okay, I'm not sure. Okay. So we go now with a uber. So uber, what does that mean? So we have 2 cases. There's always going to be 2 scenarios. One is going to be a bas Yisrael that cannot eat truma, but now maybe this uber could help her to eat truma. And the opposite is going to be a bas Kohen could eat truma, and the uber is going to stop her from eating truma. The Gemara says both ways. Bas Kohen Yisrael, if the case is talking about she's a bas Kohen and now she's married to Yisrael, she was married to Yisrael, she's pregnant with the Yisrael uber, does that stop her from eating truma? Why can't she eat truma? She's a bas Kohen. So it says no. It says in the pasuk that when her husband dies, she can go back home to eat truma from her father's home as she was in her youth. She can go back the same as she was in her youth before she got married. Before she got married, she was a bas Kohen, she could eat truma, and then she was married, she could not eat truma, and now her husband died, she can go back again to eat truma. But it says as her youth, that's extra pasuk. Coming to say she has to be in the same state. If she's pregnant, she's not in the same state as her youth. In her youth, she wasn't pregnant. Now that she's pregnant, the pasuk comes to say she's still attached to the house of the Yisrael, and she cannot eat truma of her father. What's the opposite case? Bas Yisrael the Kohen, that she was a bas Yisrael who could not eat truma, and now she's pregnant from a Kohen, her pregnancy as a Kohen, is that enough to be able to give her to eat truma? Lo machila yilud. I'm sorry. Lo machila. Why? Because yilud machil sheni yilud ena machil. That only someone who's born can give to eat truma. If he's not born, not. Rashi says this is based on the drasha where the pasuk says, "Yilud beisohem yachlu b'lachamo." That's the whole source where we learn out that the mother of a Kohen or a Kohenes is not eat truma, because it says "Yilud beisohem yachlu," and without mentioning hem yachilu, they have the ability to give to feed. So there it says we live based so only somebody that's born. So the pasuk that allows a woman to eat truma because of her children only says if they're born. So here that there's only a fetus, that's not enough ability to be able to eat truma. So we finished with the first sugya of uber. We know both ways that uber is posel bein machil. The next case is yavam. Yavam, we said, make the right color over here. The yavam, what's the case? Either one or two scenarios, either Bas Yisrael or Kohen, or Bas Kohen Yisrael. Here the Gemara goes, Bas Kohen Yisrael. She was a Kohenes, and then she was married to Yisrael, who died without children, and now she's waiting on deck to marry the Yavam, who's also Yisrael. Does that stop her from eating truma? Why can't she temporarily eat truma until she does yibum? No, pasala yeshav beis avia prata shemeres yavam. The same thing that it says that she should go back home, but the pasuk says that only if she can go back home. Not kinurah. The point is not kinurah. The point is v'shav beis avia, that she has to be able to go back home. She figuratively cannot go back home. Of course, she can go visit her father, but the point is that she cannot go back home to marry as she was able to, because she's connected, she's bonded to the Yavam until there's Yivam Chalitza. So she's bonded to the new Yavam, and that therefore she cannot go back to eat Truma from her father. And the opposite, Ibas Yisrael Koheni, she was a Bas Kohen. Did I say it wrong? Ibas Kohen, I think I got it right. Ibas Yisrael Kohen, that she was a Bas Yisrael, she cannot eat Truma, but now she was able to eat Truma because of her husband. She wants to know if she could eat Truma because of her Yavam. The same way she could eat Truma because she's the wife of a Kohen, maybe she should be able to eat Truma because she's the Yavama of a Kohen. She's waiting on deck to get Yibam from the Kohen brother. No, Lo Machila, because it says Kinyan Kaspa Rachmana. Well, Kinyan Dachihu. How come a wife of a Kohen is allowed to eat Truma? We said only because he acquired her. Kinyan Kaspa, the same way, not exactly, but the same way, in the same shorish that a Kohen buys a slave, the slave is allowed to eat Truma. So when he acquires a wife, she's allowed to eat Truma because she's his acquisition. But that only says Kinyan Kaspo. But here, this Yavam never acquired her. It was the brother who died who acquired her. So he's not allowed to give her Truma because she's not his. The question would be, there's a whole expression here if this Rosh is the Raisa or not. Could be it's an Asmachta. Here it says, if they think more literally, it means with the Raisa, the Yavam does not have the power to give his Yavama Truma until they get married. Once they get married, yes, that doesn't explain why. But in the period called Shemeres Yavam, while she's waiting to do Yavam, it's not his Kinyan. It's not his Mikdas Kaspa. His brother had acquired her. He's just Yavam. He's a brother, and he's gonna marry her or give her Chalitza. No, but Erison, we're gonna see it might be with the Raisa. The Erison is enough. Kinyan Kaspa, we're gonna see in 2 lines that when somebody does Erison, a Kohen does Erison to a woman, really that's Mikdas Kaspa. Kikach Ishisha, when he gives her the ring, that's when he acquired her, not the Nesuin. So the stage of Erison with the Raisa is enough that the woman should be able to eat Truma. We're going to say in a second that with Rabbanah they said not to. But here we're saying even with the Raisa, the way we're saying that he doesn't acquire her. It's not his acquisition, it's his brother's acquisition. He has a mitzvah to do Yibum. But till he does that, it's his brother's acquisition, and he doesn't have the ability to give Truma. So that's what the Gemara says, that the Yavam, in either way, he apostles her if he's Yisrael, and he doesn't give her Truma if he's a Kohen. The next case is Erizin, which is the regular first marriage of us, and either again both ways. Bas Kohen Yisrael would mean that she's a Bas Kohen. She wasn't allowed to eat Truma until now, and now by being Erizin, being betrothed to Yisrael, she's not allowed to eat Truma anymore. Why is that? The next page. The Kanya Vahavaya. The pasuk says that Bas Kohen. Rashi brings the pasuk, which we'll be using the pasuk a little bit. Bas Kohen Kisiyah. Here's the pasuk of Rashi. The Bas Kohen, top line. Bas Kohen Kisiyah Lezor. That says she cannot eat Truma. So what does the word Tihiyah? Tihiyah means Kedushin. It doesn't only mean when the marriage is consummated. It even means the Kedushin alone. So when the Bas Kohen gets married, Erison, to the non-Kohen, she's not allowed to eat Truma. So that's with the Raisa, that once Erison parcels. The Kanya Vavaya, this is called Kisihiyah. How about the opposite? Ibas Yisrael Kohen. So here the is the opposite. That once there was Avaya, that Kikach Ishi shows, and now speaking as Kaspa. So why could the Bas Yisrael not eat Truma because of her new husband? No. Lo machila mishum deula. So we had this more before already. Over there it says the right says she could. The Ariston does create that she should be able to eat truma because she's the acquisition of her husband the Kohen, but Rabbanan not. This Rabbanan said the reason is because since she'll be getting truma when she's still by her father's house, and over there the whole family is Israelim, she married a Kohen. She's betrothed to a Kohen, but the whole family at home, back home, are all Israelim, and she's going to get a present from the chassan, let's say some truma, and she's going to give it out. Everyone's going to take a piece. They're going to all share with her truma, and they're not allowed to eat truma. It's dangerous to have a woman getting truma in her household, which is all Israelim. She's special. She's a bas Kohen. She's Ashes Kohen now, and she could eat because she's miknas kaspa of the Kohen, but the rest of the family is not. So that's dangerous. We don't want to give truma to the bas Yisrael when she's still home. Wait till the suin, then she goes to her husband's house, and over there it's safe. So that's mirabbanan. She's not allowed to eat truma. The next one is chayrish. Chayrish is a deaf and dumb. He's not considered a bardas. He doesn't consider that he has intellect, and therefore with the rice he doesn't have the power to marry. But mirabbanan, they gave him the power to marry, that he should get married, or else he wouldn't be able to have a marriage. So mirabbanan, they made that it should be a marriage. And also the case is going to be that the marriage is going to stop her from eating truma if he's Yisrael, and not give her truma if he's a Kohen. Ibas Kohen Yisrael, he pasala the kanya b'tekanta rabbanan. Even though with the Raisa, this bas Kohen should be able to eat truma. She's a bas Kohen, and she really never got married. She married a cheresh. It's with the Raisa, and at the Raisa level, she's not married, so she should be able to continue eating truma of her father. But the kanya b'tekanta rabbanan, since Rabbanan invented that they should be considered a kedusha derabbanan, so we do look her as if she's married. Rabbanan, she's married, so Rabbanan, she's not allowed to eat truma. The opposite, Ibas Yisrael the Kohen, Lomachlu, Kinyan Kasper Rachmanav, Hailaba Kinyan. This will be the Raisa. If a Bas Yisrael married a Kohen Chayrish, so it really is not a marriage. It's not Kinyan Kasper. He doesn't have the ability to make a Kinyan, so she's not really married to him. So he doesn't have the ability to give her truma. This will be the Raisa that she wouldn't be able to eat truma because of her husband, because he's not really her husband. All that was good. And now we have the fifth case, which is a little complicated, or difficult to fit into. Not complicated, but it doesn't flow easily. It says, a 9-year-old, which we know more or less a 9-year-old, the whole difference is that his bia is a bia. When he cohabits, that's considered, he's mature enough, physical maturity, that's considered a bia. Less than that is not considered anything. So, the first thing that comes to mind is not that they had relations, but she's a shemeres yavam. She's waiting on deck. Her husband died, and she has a brother-in-law who's a 9-year-old. So that the word doesn't make sense. If so, katanami still puzzle. Which aspect are we talking about? The Bas Kohen or the Bas Yisrael? If it's a Bas Kohen that she was allowed to eat truma, and now that her husband died and she has a yavam, and the yavam is not strong enough to give her, and the yavam stops her from eating truma because we said before, that when can she eat truma from her father's house again if she can go back? But the fact that she's connected to the yavam because she can't go back, because she's meshubit, she can't marry out to the shuk. So that means that she can't go back home to eat truma. So no difference if he's 9-year-old; it could be 1 day old. Katanami nifsal pasal. If her husband dies and he has a 1-day-old brother, she also is stuck. She has to wait until he's old enough to be able to do chalitza or yibum, and she can't go back home. If she can't go back home, she can't eat truma. It has nothing to do with being 9 years old. And if it's talking about a Bas Yisrael that wants to be able to eat truma because of her yavam, who's a Kohen, nothing to do with being 9 years old. Maybe if he'd be a full adult, they also can't give truma. That's what we said before, that the yavam doesn't have the ability to give truma to his yavama. We said the reason is because miknas kaspo, although miknas kaspo shalachiv. So the mission doesn't make sense yet. So we didn't get any shot. And what does it mean so far? Then teisha shana v'yomecha, that a 9-year-old apostles and there's not machal. What does that mean? So there are going to be 2 pshatim over here. One is going to be Abaya, one is going to be Rava. First Abaya starts, and both pshatim are going to say that one of the 2 is not going to be relevant. It means the pasuk Mishnah says 2 things: posel, v'lo machil. So we're not going to get a pshat that's going to say both of them. We're going to have a pshat either that says only lo machil or a pshat that only says posel. So Abaya says, we're talking about the consummation of the marriage. What do we say? That a yavam, as long as she's waiting to do yibum, she's a shemeres yavam, she's on deck to get yibum, so then the yavam cannot give her truma. But what about if they consummated the marriage, that they did yibum, so now she's the wife of a kohen, and she could eat truma. And now we're going to say that this 9-year-old, his yibum is good enough of a yibum that it takes effect, and he should be able, the Raisa, he should be able to give her truma. Then again, the husband died without children, and she has a 9-year-old brother-in-law. that's going to do Yibum. We should wait until 13. But there was cohabitation. They had Yibum. They did the Bia. And the question is, he's a Kohen, is that strong enough to give her now Truma? So with the Raisa it should be, because they're married. With the Raisa they're married. On the Raisa level, even though there's no marriage less than 13 years old, but here that there's a Yibum, so we said that the Yibum does take a place from the Bia alone. So we would say the Yavam and Tesha Shana V'Yamecha, the Bali can do Askina, with the Raisa Kanyale, with the Raisa they're married, and she should be able to eat Truma. So we would think she's allowed to eat Truma because she's married to this Kohen, who's a 9-year-old. That Chazal downgraded the Bia, that even though they did have relations, but they downgraded, since he's not a Gadol, that the 9-year-old Bia is only being considered like Mama, and it's not considered a full Yibum, and they're not married. So therefore the Mishnah is saying that the Yibum of a Ben Tes Shanim, of a 9-year-old, is not strong enough to give her Truma. The Pshat would fit in the Mishnah. The Rashi points out that the other part of the Mishnah that says Posel, Abai is not explaining. He's only explaining the part of Ben Amachel. So Rashi says, part of the Mishnah, it's only referring to half of the Mishnah. This case of the Ben Tes is not referring to both cases. Posel of Amachel, it's only referring to Ben Amachel. But Rava has a problem with this Pshat. Amalei Rava, Yachi, Sefer Diktani, Safek Ben Teshan of Yom Mechad, Safek Sheno, Hashabade Ben Tes Lamachel, Safek Mivoya. The Mishnah continues. We saw the Mishnah before. Let's go back to the Mishnah. It says something here about a suffix. This line of the Mishnah over here, that it says something about a suffix. Suffix ben Teshana v'yamechat suffix sheinu. That we're not sure if he's 9 years old. He's borderline. We're not sure if he's 9 years old. It's a suffix after b'machmer. But over here, the issue of the 9-year-old is not saying that there's a chumrah to be 9-year-old. It means if he would have been 8 years old, surely it's not a yibum. And 9 years old, we're saying is also not enough to be machel. So the Mishnah doesn't make sense. If we say that the 9-year-old is saying that he's not enough, even though usually he would be able. Less than 9-year-old surely cannot. This bia is nothing, and we're saying that a 9-year-old with the Raisa would be a bia. No, you have to wait till 13. But then the Mishnah doesn't make sense that it says if it's a borderline 9-year-old, so they have to be machmer. What's the borderline? Less than 9-year-old surely cannot give truma. 9-year-old also cannot. So it doesn't make sense. There's no chumrah. There must be that 9-year-old is somebody who's, let's say, passing. His bia is going to passel, and less than 9-year-old wouldn't passel, and then you can say that they're borderline machmer. But the way that Rabbi explained it, that the Ben Tes is coming to say, even though the Rabbi say he's big enough that he should give truma, but we're still not going to let him truma. So there's no difference between a less than 9 years old and 9 years old. Both of them cannot give truma. So the Mishnah doesn't make sense on that point. That's Rava's kasha. Where is that on the text? Amalei Rava. Amalei Rava Yachi. The Mishnah continues. Safek ben Tashan v'yamechad, Safek sheino. That if you're not sure, you have to be machmir. That maybe he's a Ben Tes. There's no, even a Vare Ben Tes cannot eat. So there's nothing better about being less than 9 years old. Mishnah doesn't make sense. So Rav is going to say new pshat. So this is the other pshat that the Gemara is going to say in the Mishnah, and this is how we explain the Mishnah. While we learned it in the Mishnah, just in the beginning of the class, we explained the Mishnah according to Rav. The Ben Tesha Shana v'Yamechad Hanach Psulim Katan. It's talking about that it was a relation, it was a bia from somebody who's puzzled. And that's going to be the whole sugi now for today and tomorrow, that there's a din that a bia's nus, a bia's puzzles the woman. And that's what the Mishnah is talking about. The rest of the Mishnah, the first 4 things, we're not talking about that. It was talking about an uber, a oros, a yavam. Now it talks about a ben tesha. The ben tesha is going to mean that there was a bia psula, that the boy who's 9 years old, who's some isser to marry this woman. So it's going to pass away from eating truma. And only if it's 9 years old, less than 9 years old, it's not considered a bia. The pasli bibiyasa, these people that have the ability to passel the woman from now, she cannot marry a Kohen, she cannot eat truma. So what age is considered a bia? Only a 9-year-old. Uchidatanya, Plantation Shana V'Yamechad, Geramoni, Ma'avi, Mitzri, Adomi, Kusi, Nosim, Chalo, Mamze, Shabal, Kenes, the Via of Israel. It's all kinds of examples of psulim. There's Ammoni. He's a ger. Ger is good, but he's Ammoni. Ammoni from the nation of Ammon or Moab. They're not allowed to marry a Jewish girl. They have to marry a different ger, or other people that are not allowed to marry. But Kal Hashem, they're not allowed to marry. Mitzri Adomi, also there's also the mitzvah say it says only the 3rd generation is allowed to marry, but the first 2 generations of Gerim, of a Mitzri and Adomi, also are not allowed to marry. That's Chavi Asay. Kusi, they gave a din of a ger because they were not real converts. They only converted because they were scared of lions at the time, and they're not considered good Gerim. So I can go. So their bia would pass a woman. Nasin is like from the Givonim, and there was a story about Yeshua. They gave him a din of mamzer. We'll get more to that. Chalal is somebody who was born of a union of a Kohen with somebody that was not allowed to marry. A Kohen and somebody, a Gusha, Chalal, a Zona. So the child is called a Chalal, and his Bia also is going to passel the woman now. She's not allowed to eat truma. She's not allowed to marry a Kohen. Even though, just to point out, even though there was no Issa done, the Chalal is allowed to marry Yisraelis, and he's allowed to marry Candace also. But still, it passels the woman from now marrying a Kohen or eating truma. Mamzer, also sure you can't have relations with a mamzer. And if they have relations, so that Kohenes, the Bia of Yisraelis, also became passel, would mean that they're not allowed to eat truma. Even if till now they were allowed to eat truma, they're not allowed to eat truma. And also they cannot marry a Kohen anymore. So that's the Mishnah saying that a 9-year-old Bia is considered a Bia that made her puzzle. If he was a person, if this boy was a person of one of these psulim, he's not allowed to marry, Ammoni, Moavi, Mitzvah, all these cases, and he was a 9-year-old that had relations with a woman, she became puzzle to eat truma and to marry a Kohen. Unless they to the Mishnah later on. It says in the Mishnah, in Einan, this is the Mishnah tomorrow, the bottom of tomorrow's page. This is the Mishnah later on. It's the bottom of Daf Samach Tes, I guess, whatever the next Daf is going to be. And over there it says the same thing over again. Over there it says that if the people that are puzzle, so then they puzzle. That which the Mishnah we just finished saying, that's what our Mishnah means. That the Bias Ben Tes puzzles, if he's a person who's puzzle, his union, his relationship is going to puzzle the woman from marrying a Kohen. So the Mishnah says later on, why does it say 2 times for? We're not talking about, only later on the Mishnah is going to talk about people that are not Roy, love of Yisrael, so then they become puzzle. The answer is Reisha Psulei Kol, Sefer Psulei Kuna. Right, the halacha is repeated, but there are two categories. One is if the relationship was to somebody who was not allowed to marry anybody in Am Yisrael, like the cases over here about Ammoni, Moavi, Misri, there's nothing to do with Kohanim, and no one's allowed to marry these people. And the other mission is talking about Psulei Kuna over there. The ones that are dafki to like a Gusha, Halala, Zona, those are the ones that a Kohen's not allowed to marry. So the mission divides it. It says halacha twice. If they were Psulei Kuna or Psulei Kol that had a union with a woman, so then they wouldn't be allowed to eat truma anymore. Rashi has a problem that it says over there, "Men will never be Yisrael," and now we're saying that it means psulei kuna. That's a little dochak. So Rashi explains that's what it means, and also Tais has different gears, an opposite gears. But anyway, that's the end of the Gemara. And just to sum it up, that's the Mishnah. I'll go back to the Mishnah a second, and it says that these 5 people, they don't have the power to give truma if they be kohanim, and they do have the power to passel if she was eating truma. Now these people stop her from eating truma. But the last thing the Gemara said was this chat about a ben teisha shana b'yomecha, that a 9-year-old bia, a boy that's 9 years old that has relations is considered a mature bia that has the effect of passing the woman. And now the rest of the page today and tomorrow we're going to be talking about this halacha that a bias ben tes passes. And it starts now. We open up the subject, and the Gemara is not going to discuss the Mishnah anymore. It's all going to be revolving around this halacha. Kufa, we learned in this brisa, Ben Teshan of Yamechad, Yamoni, Maravi, Mitzvi, Adomi, Kusi, Nasim, Chalo, Mamzer, Shabbat, Hanes, Levi of Israelis, Paslan, Paslua, that a 9-year-old boy who was puzzled that had relations with a woman, puzzles the woman, and we said both that she cannot eat truma and that she cannot marry a Kohen. The brisa brings 2 more opinions, which we're not going to discuss today. We're going to discuss it tomorrow. But in today's discussion, we're going to discuss the Tanakama. But we have 2 more opinions over here. One is going to be of Yossi, and one is going to be of Shimon Gamliel. So we'll read what they say, and then tomorrow we'll elaborate and open up the window. What do they mean to say? Rav Yossi Omer, Kol Shezar Apostle Poster, Kol Shein Zar Apostle Ain't Apostle. Obviously, on the Tanakama, not anybody that's apostle also has the ability to make that when he makes has a union with a woman, makes her apostle. There's one more condition. It has to be that his children also will be apostle. Zaro is apostle. I just looked at the Gemara later on. It's going to talk about there are some of these people that they're apostle, but the next generation is not going to be apostle. For instance, a Mitzri and Adomi. Mitzri and Adomi is only also for the first 2 generations. The 3rd generation is already going to be mutter to come Lakoho. So even though he, let's say, a second generation Mitzri, so he's not allowed to marry a Bas Yisrael. And if he did, does it apostle the woman? So Tanakama says yes, he's not allowed to marry. So it apostles the woman. The verse is going to say no, that since his children are not apostle, so he's not apostle enough to marry to apostle the woman either. Just like his children are going to be the 3rd generation of Mitzri Adomi, so it's not going to affect the woman that he has relations with, even though they were not allowed to marry. Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, Kol Shatanosi Bito Atanosi Almanoso, Kol Shein Atanosi Bito Atanosi Almanoso. A different condition that it's not like Tanakama that any kind of be a psula is going to apostle the woman. Only if it has the condition that the daughter also will be apostle. This the Gemara is going to say about Ammoni and Moavi, that Allah is everybody knows Ammoni v'lo Ammonis, Moavi v'lo Moavis. So the daughters, the females of Ammoni and Moavi are not pasul. So here Rav Shimon Gamliel says that a man who pasels his daughters, he's the kind of a person that's going to pasel the woman that he has relations with. But if his daughters are not going to be pasul, like an Ammoni Moavi, that his daughters are not going to be pasul, so too the woman that he has relations with is not going to become pasul because of that. But we're not going to elaborate on that too much because I don't know what it says. But that's the translation of these words of Yosef Shem Gamliel. But now today we're going to discuss Tanakama. Tanakama says that anybody who's pasul that has a relation with a woman, it passes the woman from being able to eat truma and from being able to marry a kohen. And the rest of the day today is going to be saying where do we know it from? Of course, like always, whenever we talk about drushes, always a lot of halachas come in also. We learn new information, but the Gemara is focusing on what the drusha. Where do we know that from? How do you know that when a man has relations with a woman who is usher to him, prohibited relations, so it makes the woman pasul to eat truma or to marry a kohen from now on? But not immediately. From where do you know that? The pasuk is talking about that Bas Kohen is Lali Truma, and she marries Israel, kosher marriage, everything's fine. The word Zar means a non-Kohen. He's a kosher Jew, he's just not a Kohen. So it says, as long as she's married to him, she's not allowed to eat Truma. The pasuk continues that actually, if the marriage is over, either because he died or he divorced her, then she's allowed to eat Truma again. But the Gemara is going to say a drash on this pasuk, not the pasuk pshat. Ish Zor, the pasuk pshat means a non-Kohen, but the Gemara is going to dash him, the Ish Zor means somebody has pasul. Besides the pasuk pshat, we're going to learn another drasha that if she had relations with a person who's pasul, not that only temporarily she's pasul from now on. Once she had relations, illegal relation, illicit relations, so then the woman becomes pasul. Is Bas Kohen that has relations to Ish Zar, not to Israel, to somebody who's pasul. So then she becomes permanently pasul from eating truma. The Gemara goes on a long time to say the pasuk is necessary, and it's going to end. It's going to take a long time, but the Gemara is going to come out that we're right. It is extra pasuk, and we are going to be able to learn it out. It goes till about 20 lines on Amud Beis, till where the parentheses ends. There's artificial parentheses just to show what, just to map out what we're doing. So the Gemara is going to have difficulty. This pasuk is going to be the maskana. This is the pasuk you learn out that once she had relations with the pasul person, she becomes pasul to truma. But the Gemara is going to have difficulty. We need the pasuk for the pasuk pshat. That's the Gemara's kasha. We need the pasuk pshat. You have no room for a drasha. A drasha is only when there's some nuance that's extra. But if you need the pasuk for the simple pshat, you can't learn out a fancy drasha. So here the pasuk says when she marries a non-kohen, she's not allowed to eat truma. So how could you learn out this fancy halacha that if she's never allowed the pasuk, she becomes pasuk? Over there, you don't need this pasuk. You don't need this pasuk because there's another pasuk. Let's try to highlight the other pasuk over here. There's a pasuk that says Vishava al beis avia. It's not the it's me vishava. Over there it says that the woman, after the marriage is over, he divorced her or died. So it says that the woman, the Bas Kohen, can go back home. It says she can go back home to her father's home as her youth and eat her father's food, which means truma. So the Gemara says that pasuk is enough. From there you can learn out that while she's married to the Kohen, she's not allowed to eat truma. As long as she's married to the Israel, she can't, because it says after he dies, she can go home. That means that we could infer from that as long as she's married, she may not. You don't need the pasuk to say openly that she's not allowed to eat truma while she's married. That since the pasuk says after the marriage is over, she can go back home to her father's house to eat truma, we could infer from that she cannot eat as long as she's married. So you don't need the pasuk to say that Bas Kohen ki siel izor he b'shumas hakadashim lo socher. But the Gemara says no, that pasuk is not enough. The pasuk of the Shabbat wouldn't be enough. Maybe this pasuk, it's true. He would have been able to infer that she's not allowed to eat truma, but it only would have been in a positive statement that when she go, that's called we could infer from a negative commandment, from a positive commandment, what she should not do. The pasuk says that after marriage is over, she can go back to her father's home, and we can infer that while she's married, she may not. But that's only it's not so strong. But the pasuk says, do not eat. So it's stronger to have a negative commandment than to have a positive commandment. So maybe the pasuk is still not extra to be able to darshan new halachas that nivel la pasla. The Gemara says no, we have a lav also. Lav. Once we said that she's not, once we inferred that she's not allowed to eat truma while she's married to Yisrael, so she's like anybody else that is zar. Any zar is not allowed to eat. If she became a zar now, she became a non-Kohen. Since she's married to a Kohen, she's not allowed to eat. That the pasuk did tell us the information she's not allowed to eat. So we have the regular lav that nobody's a non-Kohen is allowed to eat. Then it says lo yochal. But the Gemara says no, that wouldn't be enough. On the page, we turn the page. Rashi explains that means that even though we said she's not allowed to eat, it doesn't make her into a zar. So even though there is a lo saseh for a non-Kohen to eat, but she's a bas Kohen married to a zar, she's not allowed to eat, but only a bava say. So you wouldn't be able to learn out that it's saseh. So the lo saseh. So the Gemara is still asking that the pasuk is necessary. You can't learn how to do halacha. The Gemara says no. There is a pasuk for that. It says 2 times. There's extra pasuk over there. So we would be able to learn out that this woman also is a lo saseh. So therefore, the pasuk that says the Abbas Kohen Kisiyeh, the Izor should not eat truma. That's coming to tell you the fancy drasha that if she had relations with a apostle, then she's not allowed to eat anymore. There's still another drasha necessary. There's also a drasha that says not a negative, but it says something positive. That the halach is that Ma'aser Sheni, onen is not allowed to eat. Onen means somebody's relative died. So it says that onen is not allowed to eat Ma'aser Sheni. How about truma? So there is allowed to eat truma. How do you know? In this pasuk, it says some drasha here. The whole Zohar will learn out that only a Zohar is not allowed to eat truma, but an onen is allowed to eat truma. But a onen could eat truma, so you need the pasuk for that. So it's not left over to be able to darshan that a nivel apostle apostla. Then my answer is that basically Chanina means zor v'chol zor not, because there's extra word over there. So there's still extra words, and we still have our pasuk available to be able to learn out nivel apostle is possible. So you're a little further. That's the here the word says v'chol zor. Zor v'chol zor. You may be right, but the word doesn't say it over here. It's still necessary. There's another drasha for this pasuk that we use, and the more is attacking that we don't have an extra pasuk to learn out this halacha that she had relations with the apostle first makes a pasuk. What is the pasuk used for? That this bas Kohen that she married Yisrael, what do we say? That when the marriage is over, she can go back home and eat truma. But there's another thing she wants to eat, and that is chazav v'shok. That means that the bas Kohen is allowed to eat karbanis, kachim kalim, that the Kohen gets a chelik, the chazav v'shok, the breast and the leg shok. So it goes to the Kohen, and the bas Kohen also is also allowed to eat it. But once she was married to Yisrael, even if this is different than truma, even if the Yisrael died or divorced her and she's going back home, she could eat her father's truma, but she can't eat chazav v'shok anymore. And that you learn out from this pasuk. Trumas HaKodashim, the Gemara says, doesn't only mean Truma, it means Truma she cannot eat as long as she's married to the Yisrael, but afterwards she could. But there's a drush over here that when she married a Yisrael, she can never eat Trumas HaKodashim. What's Trumas HaKodashim? Mu'aman HaKodashim. Whatever is lifted up from the Kodashim, which means the chazav v'shok, which you separate from the korban and give to the Kohen, that she's never allowed to eat. But that's a new pasuk. You need a pasuk for that. So you have no extra pasuk to learn out that nivel pasuk becomes pasuk. No, in he b'kodashim lo sochel. My b'srumas hakodashim shama minotati. So there's an extra nuance in the pasuk to say 2 drushes. So the Gemara came out safely after all that. It came out good that there are a lot of drushes over here that a bas Kohen, the pasuk shot that a bas Kohen cannot eat truma as long as she's married to the Yisrael, and it's even a lav, and what else do we have? And then onen is mutter to eat truma, and once she got married to Yisrael, she's never allowed to eat chazav v'shok even after she comes back to her father's home. All that is true, but there's still room for extra drasha to say that if she had relations with a man who's puzzled to her, or a prohibited relation, so then she becomes permanently puzzled from eating truma. So we got through it. We got the drasha. The original drasha was good. We had a lot of hurdles to take care of, but we took care of it. And back to the original drasha. The whole Zohar, he was the bas Kohen Kisiyah is Zohar. That means Zohar doesn't only mean Yisrael. The Drush is going to say it means a puzzle, and he was Shumasa Kachim Lo Sochel. It's not like Truma anymore. That was good. But the Gemara says Ashkelon Kohenes. That's talking about a bas Kohen. How about the Levi of Israelis? How do you know that the Levi of Israelis is not a bas Levi, bas Israel? How do you know she's not allowed to eat Truma once she had relations with a puzzle person? It means if she married a Kohen now, she's not allowed to eat Truma because once upon a time she had relations with somebody who's puzzle, so she's out. She can't eat Truma anymore, even though she marries a Kohen. How do you know that? The bas ubas. There's some place we dash is the extra above. So here too, we darshan extra vav, ubas kohen to tell you this drasha. Hachanami bas ubas, we could darshan the same thing as he darshan that the extra vav tells you even a bas levi and a bas Yisrael. The Gemara says, "Kaman kabakiva the darish vavin." That's the machlokas. That's what Eliezer said. That's not so simple that a vav you could darshan. It says extra vav. Sometimes we say that a vav is that's the way you talk. You don't have to have a special drasha for that. But no, afilu temer rabbanan, fully abasi kol yisevahu. Period. That the Gemara doesn't mean to say not for the vav. First, the Gemara says the vav is extra. Then the Gemara says that not the vav is extra, but the whole word is extra. They didn't have to say the whole word bas. So everybody can learn out from here that bas Levi, bas Yisrael also pasal titrun. Makim also found that a bas Kohen, a bas Levi, bas Yisrael, if they had relations with somebody that's pasal to them, that's a prohibited relation. They're forever pasal titrun. Next subject. Ashkechan truma lekunim in Olan. So there are two things you have to talk about. One is that you're not allowed to eat truma. And the other one is that you're not allowed to marry a Kohen. You're not allowed to marry a Kohen. So that's a new drasha. You need a new drasha to know that this, the psula, if she had relations with somebody who's also for her to marry, she's forever not allowed to marry a Kohen, which is going to be a zona. It says, Isha zona b'chalalolo yikachu, Isha gushama Isha. We're coming to define a zona. That what if she had a psula, she becomes a zona. So how do you know that? How do you know that that's what a zona is? So the Gemara says, that's the first thing Gemara says. We just finished talking about it. What did we say? We said that Levi of Yisraelis, not only a Kohen, it's not only a Bas Kohen, even a Bas Levi and a Bas Yisrael. And the Gemara says, what does it talk about a Bas Levi? Bas Levi, Bas Yisrael don't need Truma anyway. The whole issue of them is to marry a Kohen. After Levi of Yisraelis, lo l'tuna marbina lo, be the Truma, the no smech Truma ninu. A Levi, Bas Levi, Bas Yisrael doesn't have any right to eat Truma. Only the Kohen eat Truma. So when we said a special pasuk, Bas Ubas, or the whole word of Bas is an extra word to say that applies to Levi of Yisraelis, that by definition means about marrying a Kohen. Because there's no other, because they don't have truma, they don't eat any truma. Except the pasuk says that they are included in this psul when they had relations with a person who's puzzle, they become puzzle. It must be for marriage to a Kohen because there's no truma. But the Gemara says no. I can give you a case where a Bas Levi, Bas Yisrael is eating truma. It's possible for a Bas Levi, Bas Yisrael married a Kohen, and now they have children. And the children would allow her to eat truma. That's what we said before. That a child who's a Kohen or Kohenes gives the mother to eat truma. So I was saying, but if she had relations with a person who's puzzle, so now she became puzzle. So we still don't see us talking about marriage to a Kohen. Maybe it's talking about her eating truma also. The Gemara says no, that's not, doesn't make sense. To say that she's puzzled because she's eating because of her son, you wouldn't need a pasuk for that. We would have been able to learn that from the Kohenes. If we know already the first drasha that a Bas Kohen cannot eat truma, and the Gemara said you need another pasuk to say that a Bas Levi, Bas Yisrael cannot eat truma. And we're talking about truma, not about marriage, just about truma. And what we say the case would be that the Bas Levi, Bas Yisrael, how they eating truma because they have a son, or they have a child, a daughter, a son, a daughter that's a Kohen, and they're giving them the ability to eat truma. The Gemara says you wouldn't need another pasuk for that. You don't need the Bas to tell you that because we could have done it on our own. Because if the Kohenes cannot eat truma and she's a holy woman, the Kohenes, the Bas Kohen is a holy woman, and because of her kedusha of the Kuna, and she cannot eat truma, so surely the Bas Levi, Bas Yisrael, who's eating truma because of her child, surely she should become invalidated from eating truma. You don't need a pasuk for that. If you have a pasuk, it must become to tell you something more about marriage. She should marry a Kohen. But the Gemara says that's not true. The logic is not true. Faulty logic. Kohenes the Kaddish Gufa Pasala. Hadlo Kaddish Gufa Lo Pasala. Maybe it's the opposite. If the source of her eating truma is because she's a holy woman, so then this put a stain on her holiness. The fact that she had relations with a person who's pasal, so that took away the kedusha. That stained her kedusha. But if the reason why she's eating truma is because of her, she's the mother of a Kohen, so maybe the Bia Psula doesn't pasal her. The fact that she had a prohibited union doesn't take away the fact that she's a mother of a Kohen. So you do need a pasuk for it. So what is the Gemara driving at? So maybe you need a pasuk for a Bas Kohen, Bas Levi, Bas Yisrael, that they become invalidated from eating truma, and you still have no source that you're not allowed to marry a Kohen. Ella lekahuna kavachomer migvusha. The Gemara says, how do you know that these people are not allowed to marry Kohen? The Gemara will say you don't need a pasuk for that. That's going to be a kavachomer. After we know the facts that they're not allowed to eat truma, so now we could on our own figure out that they're not allowed to marry a Kohen. a couple chomer, Migrusha, a divorced woman. A divorced woman is not eat truma. She's a bas kohen, and she got married, and she got divorced. She's not eat truma. She's not eat truma, even though she's divorced. She's not eat truma, but she can't marry a kohen. A grusha can't marry a kohen anymore. So a couple chomer, not grusha she mutas v'truma. Asur lakuna, zusha asur v'truma in a din sheb asur lakuna. If a woman who's mutter to eat truma, that's a grusha, but she's not allowed to marry a kohen. So somebody's not allowed to eat truma. You're sure you're not allowed to marry a kohen. That's going to be the source how you know. The Master Kasha, that wouldn't be enough to give malchus. Are you allowed? Is that enough source to give malchus? Because we say you can't give a punishment from a kal v'chomer. To give a punishment, you have to have a perish pasuk. And here it's no pasuk; it's only a kal v'chomer. The Gemara says, "Gila miltz b'almahu." This is just revealing. That's the end of the Gemara. We'll stop here today. But just to point out this, let's go on the Gila miltz b'almahu. I think that it's not so simple what the words mean. It might mean the Gemara might mean that you're right. There is no malchus. I'm not sure if the Gemara means to say that there is malchus, and we learned it out that it's included in whatever we said till now, or there's not going to malchus. There's a pasuk bas kohen kisi year. You know, she's pasuk truma. Kal v'chomer is not allowed to marry a kohen, but that's it. It might be that there's no malchus. I think that it's not so simple. This last Gemara, maybe she does not get malchus. If a kohen married her, because she had relations with a personal person, so maybe there's no malchus. That's the end of the Gemara for today. Just to sum it up, if anybody wants a summary.
Yes.
So the Mishnah spoke about these 5 people that are someplace in between. They're enough to pass on a woman who's eating truma, and they're not enough to give her, if they're kohanim, they're not enough strong to give them truma. And 4 or 5 people were, but 4 of them are easy. The one is going to be a different subject. The Uber, a pregnant woman. So if she's a bas kohen and she's pregnant with a Yisrael, from a family of Yisrael, so then she wouldn't be able to eat truma. You have all the drushes for that, but we'll just say the halachas alone. The yavam, that her husband died, and now she's a bas kohen, but now her husband was Yisrael who died, and now she's on deck to marry a yavam. Also, she cannot eat truma because of that. I'm not sure if I'm saying the right thing. Bas kohen to Yisrael. Okay, we did the Mishnah before, we're doing it again, but without all the drushes, the Gemara mostly said drushes over here, that these people, if they were married, if they're bas kohen, the Uber will stop her from eating truma, the Yavam will stop her from eating truma, a Yavam Yisrael. Erison, married to Yisrael, also stops her from eating truma, and the Cheresh, which is a marriage Rabbanan, if to a Yisrael, also stops her Rabbanan from eating truma. The opposite would be that she's a bas Yisrael who wants to eat truma because of these cases, not enough. The Uber, she's pregnant from a kohen. That's not enough to give her truma until he's born. The Yavam who's a kohen also cannot give her truma until they marry. The Erison is not enough to give the woman truma until they actually consummate the marriage. And the Cheresh, they cannot give her truma even though they're married, have a happy marriage, but they're not really married with the Raisa. So she's not owned by a kohen, so she cannot eat truma. Then the Gemara comes out, the Maskana is talking about not these cases, a possible person, some kind of a prohibited union, that once he's 9 years old, that's considered a bia, and he would passel her from eating truma if she's a kohen, the bia, the Israelis, and also not only not eating truma, also marrying a kohen. Once they had a bia psula, it would be us to marry a kohen. Even if it's a suffix, if he's 9 years old, also have to be machmir. If there be an erison, which we said passels the erison to Yisrael, passels of eating truma. So even if it's a suffix, if it was erison 9 years old, 13 years old or not, shtei saris also will be passel. And those are all the drushes over there. And we came out that it also is possible to marry a kohen also. Okay, that's your call. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Shabbos.
Thank you. Tomorrow 9:15 is good for everybody? Okay, 9:15. That's your call. Thank you.